Rhonda Birkbeck of Birkbeck Design, Interiors, and Insight, who has been working in Maine for nearly 30 years. She offers interior design and insight while presenting a unique, eclectic, globally inspired aesthetic vision for home, retail, hospitality, and corporate spaces. I have seen Rhonda's work in a number of places, and it is amazing. She and I both live in the same town, and a few years ago, we were talking about her work at Crate and Barrel, and also from a store that she used to own in Portland called Dun Roman. And a lot of people may remember Dun Roman because I think it was probably one of the most beautiful stores in the old port ever, and it was in the old bottle building, right? What's it called? The Clayman bottle building. And I always have appreciated her aesthetic, and we got talking and she said, oh, I would love to do a workshop. So now, like fast forward, probably 18 months ago that we had that conversation, and Robert and I realized that in planning workshops, that this is something that not only our downtowns need, but our businesses need, and really this whole conversation surrounding, you know, the new retail and how can retail survive in this world. Because it's not only, you may have heard the expression, selling out the front door, but also selling out the back door, right? You're shipping out the back and you're selling out the front. But what else makes retail unique and something so important? And I feel like storefront design is a big piece of that picture. So without further ado, I would like to pass the microphone to Rhonda and have you take it away. And we are so lucky to have her squeeze this into her busy schedule. You sure? Yeah. Yeah, and I'll be right there if something you need something.
So first of all, I'm so happy to be here, and I want to thank Maine Development Foundation for inviting me and all of you for coming. I think when Ann and I first spoke, she said, we'll probably have about 8 to 10 people come, and I was like, sure, no problem, I can whip that up like that. It was so exciting for me that so many people would be interested in doing something that makes a difference. I, for one, have been in retail since my early 20s, starting out with Crate and Barrel, moving through Pottery Barn, moving through some of the big guys, and then owning my own business in Kennebunkport and the Old Port in Portland for over 10 years. I do not feel that retail is dead. I believe it is alive and thriving. We just have to change the way we think, and we will continue on probably better than we ever have been before. So I want to thank you all for coming and sharing something that is my passion. So just a quick bio. I started out in my early 20s, part of the design team for Crate and Barrel that took Crate and Barrel from what was accessories and home store, separate divisions of Crate and Barrel, and I was part of a team of 12 people that helped to create the Crate and Barrel home store. I was able, because I was young, Gordon Siegel kind of took me under his arm, under his wing. He is the owner still of Crate and Barrel. And I was able to learn from some of the people who defined experiential retail. They were the first people to say, we're not just a store that we want people to come in. We want to create an experience that is unique to Crate and Barrel. I then went on to doing work on my own throughout Boston, helping small businesses grow on Newbury Street and Boylston Street, doing window design, doing store design, and doing a lot of product development. My heart called me home. I'm a Maine girl. I grew up in Waterville. Talk about a downtown. When I was growing up, Waterville was a thriving downtown. It was where we all wanted to be, kids, adults, and watching that decline is probably what has inspired me throughout my life to want to make sure that that doesn't happen in our downtowns. I was called back to Maine and started out in Kennebunkport. At 25, I decided it was time to kind of put my money where my mouth was and design my own store. I started with a little 1,000 square foot space on Ocean Avenue in Kennebunkport, about 100 yards off the road. So I had to learn a lot very quickly about storefront, about captivating someone in that type of market. I then, after a couple years successful in Kennebunkport, we opened a 4,000 square foot space in the Old Port in Portland and renovated that historic building on 4th Street. After 10 years of doing that, it was time for me to kind of progress. I had been approached by General Growth Properties, who owns over 250 malls worldwide. And they had seen the work that I had done at my store and wanted to change their impact on the world by trying to create lifestyle centers rather than malls. So they were trying to mimic our downtowns within their malls. And I was passionate about trying to help within that market. I wasn't really fond of the big corporate demon, but I felt like I might be able to learn more and make a mark. In that time, I helped businesses like Pottery Barn, Anthropology, Williams-Sonoma, some of the big brands actually identify themselves. So a great example, and one that I really want to help you think about, are those big boys, in many ways, are trying to do what you already can do, and that is create experience. You have the ability within your reach to create not only incredibly unique experiences, but incredibly powerful relationships. That's what they hired me to do for them, and in many cases, we could get there, but never quite as much as the store that was just around the corner. After doing that, I went into corporate design and have designed a lot of restaurants throughout Maine, Frontier, Gather in Yarmouth, Shipyard Brewing, throughout Sea Dog Brewing. So I have a lot of experience with working with some of our best and some that were just starting out. So I'm really excited to be here with you today. Our agenda, well, maybe that was supposed to be there. There we go. Our agenda for the day is to discuss, one, I think the history and importance of storefront and windows. How many of you know what the origin of windows were? It seems pretty obvious, right, that it was to show your wares. But in the early days, it was actually to help those who, many of their purchasers were illiterate. So a window was literally to tell the story. It was literally to say, this is what we do, because you might not be able to read our sign. I think over time, maybe we've gotten away a little bit from being courageous enough to actually tell our story. And I mean the story, not just the product. So we're going to be talking a lot about that today. We're going to talk about brand awareness and how we can create a brand awareness through our storefront presence. I want to talk a lot about the window being your silent seller. I think a lot of us don't take advantage of the fact that we pay for that square footage by the inch and how to get the most out of the investment that we're making. And then how to create captivating and inspiring windows. And then how to design them with intent and purpose. So how many out here have been in business 10 years? Yeah, okay, that's a lot. How many have started feeling the pinch of Amazon? Yeah. So, like I mentioned earlier today, I really, truly believe that this is not the end of brick and mortar retail. I think it is the beginning, and the beginning of something very unique and very powerful. But it all begins with experience and the relationship that we create with our people. In the last year and a half, I was hired by a global marketing firm to work with big brands like Ford Motor Company, Jadot Wine. And you cannot imagine how many tables I've sat around with the executives. I mean, when we think Ford Motor Company, we think, right, they know what they're doing. But they would sit and look at me and say, how do we reach our people? And the biggest answer that I would say to them is, get in front of them. You have to get out there. You put away all the statistical studies. They have importance, but you have to get with your people. You have that ability every day, and I'm really excited to talk to you about the ways that we can go about doing that. So we're going to first talk about storefronts and storefronts that sell. So one of the things that I think is really important to remember is that every aspect of your store, every square inch of your store is advertising. It's a way to capture attention and bring people in. The first impression to your brand is through your signage. That can be seen oftentimes from a very far distance. So having that signage be important, it establishes the brand. And it also establishes a permanence. A well-lit entrance. It lights the way, it says welcome. You would probably never approach a home whose front door light wasn't on. We have to pay more attention, in my opinion, within the state of Maine to light our entrances. When you shut your lights down in your window at 4 in the afternoon because you think you're conserving energy, you're missing the drive-by people. You're missing the walk-by people. You're missing the people who are walking at night. So I want to talk a lot about lighting those entrances and creating a welcoming entrance. And then, of course, appealing windows. And this really is to turn browsers into shoppers. If we're not using our windows, we're just letting people pass us by, losing an incredible opportunity. This is an opportunity to showcase our brand, and it really truly can be the make or break moment that turns a browser into a shopper. In my belief, there are pretty much 3 crucial elements to selling a storefront, and they are striking signage, a well-lit entrance, and appealing windows. So the first one I want to talk about is signage. Now, we're probably from Maine, and with our downtowns are going to say, I don't have anything in my downtown that even remotely looks like this. But we do. So an interesting thing on Route 1 in Yarmouth recently, an old Napa auto store that was definitely tired, moved to a new location and left. Remember what all the Napa auto stores all look like? Left this building on Route 1. A visionary took over that building, painted it some really great colors, put a giant sign on it, and honestly, it is one of the most attractive and interesting buildings. I think one of the important things with signage is that in this first one over here with the bicycle, who, what, and why. I am a bicycle store. I sell clothing, gear, and bicycles. This trunk store, what does this say? So this is a storefront. These are storefronts that sell, not so much in the window, but everything about that storefront says, come on in. I've rolled out the rug for you. I'm here to welcome you. Here's a place to sit if you'd like to in front of my window. Come on in and I'll show you my wares. It also does a really great job describing what you're going to find when you get in the doors. This green painter, they actually painted the building. So the building becomes part of their sign. Having been into historic districts with my own retail stores, I know that difficult war we wage often with our towns and what we can do for signage and what our square footage allows for signage. When we were designing Sea Dog Brewing, the big restaurant space over by the mall, Fred Forsley, who is a great friend of mine, he's kind of the guy that likes to push the limit. But in this case, the city of South Portland had said, if you push the limit, we aren't going to let you do this or this or this, which was hopefully part of his future plan. So he, of course, wanted a sign that was 200 feet tall and 400 feet wide and couldn't have it. So what we did was we painted the entire side of the building in the background color of what the sign would be, and then put the logo of, I can't even remember his name right now, the Sea Dog, on top of that. So the sign literally grew. There's just some interesting ways you can take older buildings and just make that brand, make that building part of your brand. I think here on the bottom is a really good example of just filling an empty space. So many cafe windows that you can see right through to the back of the cafe. If there's only 2 people in there, it's not the most inviting environment. If there's a little bit of foreground, a little bit of description, that's $30 from a vinyl lettering company. That's not an incredible expense to fill that space and say welcome. The Farm and Fable is just a good example of signage and a good idea for us to consider that we not always think about how do I apply the signage to my building. And that's one way to do it for sure, and you want to look at your spaces and understand how traffic works. But another way is to grab that attention from all the way down the road. This Kindred, it's hard to read up close, but this not only gives the company's name, but a small description of local artisans come on in. And by keeping it subtle, you can see some of the wares beyond. So you're being told what's in and invited to take a peek. This is a great example, New York cupcakes. I mean, I am New York cupcakes. Sometimes we need to be that obvious. And then this one here, I think, is a great example of creating some mystery and intrigue. It's telling you what they are. It's a home store. It's giving an inviting atmosphere, but it's saying in order to know the rest of the story, you gotta come in. So I think another piece that we often miss is sidewalk appeal. And I think this is kind of a three-step process. So I don't know how many of you are familiar with the Old Port, but when we took our space in the Old Port, it was 1998. The building that we took had never been open to the public. It had no heat, never had heat, never had plumbing, and never had electricity. The city of Portland tried at one point to hook electricity up to the building in the 40s, and the owner cut the wire. So the wire was still hanging off the building. It had over 2 million bottles. It was a bottle collection in the building. We knew if we went into that space and turned it completely into ours, there would be many people in the public that would say, I've been looking at that building my whole life. So we worked out an arrangement with the State of Maine Historical Society. We donated the original sign and we had a replica made. So we're taking up the best real estate for our signage with that sign. We did it with intent. We did it to honor the building, honor the community we were in, and then created our signage in the windows and around it. It made us a lot of friends. It won us historical preservation awards. And it did a lot, I think, to tell to the community, we're here, but we're part of you. If you know where we were located in the Old Port, you will know that when we went there, there was a strip club next door. There was the Tropical Penguin Bar on the other side. There was a really great risque dance club on the other side of the road. We really believed that if we set a mold, we could not only make an impact in our own world and shorten that dollar per square footage space. We had 4,000 square feet. So we knew we needed to keep that number as small as we could, and this was an environment that we felt like if we could take a risk, we might be able to make a difference. I swept that walk daily, not in front of my own store. I swept that walk 3 blocks down and 3 blocks the other way, every day. And we did it because we knew that the others might not care, the others might not be paying attention, but it was our responsibility to create an environment that led to our store. And so every day, I and my employees swept it. It was a ceremony. On the back side, we had a double entrance. We had an entrance on Wharf Street, which was even rougher. I mean, the things that I found on my back doorstep on some mornings were literally frightening. One of the products that we sold were pure essential oils. And so every day we would mix a bucket of a little bit of lavender or a little bit of bay leaf or a little bit of eucalyptus in a big bucket of water, and we would pour that bucket out onto the street. These aren't new stories. This is what we used to do. This is what we used to do because we took pride in our community. This is what we used to do because this was our home. And who else was going to do it if we didn't? I believe if we can get back to that. I wouldn't suggest it should, using up essential oils to pour on the street if it's not something that you sell. But for us, people would come from miles away going, I could smell you all the way down the block. It was part of our selling. But I would really say, think about what your entrance feels like. Think about what your neighbor's entrance feels like and take responsibility for it. It became a ceremony for my employees. These were teenage girls. They probably didn't sweep at home. But each one of us had our own broom, and we went up and down the street doing it. The next stage is intriguing windows. This is where we start to tell our story. This is where we start to let our community know who we are. And then, very important again, and you'll hear it a million times, inviting and a well-lit entrance. So now we kind of get into more of the specifics. So I'm not sure if you can read it from where you are, but in the first one up here, over the entrance, it says, "Color makes people happy." Inside the store, they sell a variety of colored pencils, like artwork, that type of thing. But everything about that storefront represents that brand. Not only have they sold appeal and enticed you into the store, but they've represented what they sell on the outside and invited you in. The second one I think is really interesting because it almost draws you in step by step. It's like, okay, here we are. And you're going to come a little closer to find out a little more, and a little closer to find out a little more. So those of you with smaller storefronts probably often drive by windows and say, well, if I had a window like that, I could probably really show what I'm doing. But I would disagree. I think we all have a really interesting opportunity, and our job is really to get people in the door, whatever little steps it takes to get there. This other is a really great example of taking the whole storefront and making it theirs. They painted it that teal blue and said, this is ours. This separates us from our next door neighbor, and this makes it ours. This is a pretty interesting concept in that if you can see up there, their signage is small. So you get the big presence, and you get the feel, and you get the setting with the plants. But in order to find out more, you actually have to come in closer. So our whole job is to get them in the door, step by step by step. This one that says Clawfoot Tub, I think, is interesting because they've lit it so well on the interior that you actually get a glimpse of what is happening inside. I think this is another interesting way of just enhancing your storefront with plants. It doesn't cost a lot of money, and it does make a difference. This is a great way in the coffee shop to fill an empty space. So if you were a passerby and you were standing like right about here, your view through that is all empty, right? Everybody's sitting down because it's a cafe. So without filling that little block of space, even if there were 50 people in there, you'd be looking at the empty space. So by filling that little block of space, you've kind of not only said who we are and what we do, but you've made it, the presence on the inside feel more full. Open doors. We live in Maine. It never gets so hot in here that we shouldn't have our doors open and shouldn't have that welcoming feel. Music wafting out. Air conditioning, I mean, we had air conditioning at the store in Portland. It never worked, mostly for one, and if we were doing what we should be, the door was opening and closing so much. Keeping that door open as much as you can sends a far better message. And then a lot of times I think in Maine, I mean, and I have already told you I love Maine, but I think some store, you're cluttering up the front of my store. Instead of, come sit in front of my store, make it look really busy. Because then other people are going to be walking by from 3 blocks away and go, what's going on down there? There's a bunch of people gathered. I would suggest in a clear and simple and clean way, invite people to gather around your storefront. So now we talk a little bit about messaging. This is all still referring to storefront. So there are really 3 kinds of signage that I want to talk about today. One is informal signage, informational signage, which helps customers understand who we are and why we're here. There's directional signage that talks about open hours, the entrance, guidelines, no shirt, no shoes, no service, cell phones away. I think when we do that in an intentional way, if at our storefront, we let the client, the customer, the potential new relationship know, we would prefer you don't bring your drinks in. Not in a Post-it note, not in a handwritten sign, but in an intentional way. It sets the tone. People know, they're not embarrassed. And when we do those handwritten signs, we're trying to send the same message, but it looks kind of like, hey, look, put your drink down. I think there's again, vinyl lettering is your best friend. Make friends with your local sign maker. Vinyl lettering is so inexpensive, and it's an incredible way of setting a tone of permanence as well as getting your message across. And then there's persuasive signage, which kind of influences that potential customer. It creates a connection through language or imagery. We'll look at a couple examples. So in this example up here, this is an example of messaging brand. So she's putting in the foreground her logo. She's saying this is who we are in a way that doesn't block that she could have a mannequin in there. She could have other things in it, but it's saying at the foreground, this is who we are. In this one, the example of shop hours. So we live in an age of retail where handwritten signs done professionally are acceptable and fun. I think this is a great example. It also is a brand. That little heart at the bottom tells us something about the store that's in. The font they chose tells us something about the style of store that we're walking into. I think this is a great, flowers can't solve all problems, but it's a great start. I mean, that's such a wonderful message, and again, fills potentially what could be an empty space. This one I think is a great example because they're suggestive selling. So they're telling you, we have green tea, we have cappuccino, they just put their menu board on their window. So they're saying, you come on in, these are the things that we offer. And in a cafe, filling what would be a very hard window to, express a story in. In this bottom one, they're talking about who we are, what we do. We sell decor, apparel, and gifts. This is a great example of using lettering to showcase a singular event. So this is Levi's, hand-painted with a paintbrush, saying, come in for your custom fitting. So this is a really great way to temporarily talk about something that you're offering that's exciting and fun, and it's a razor blade off when you're done. I think this is an interesting example. It's hard for you to read up there, but it's on one side they have a quote from Julia Childs. So this is a way for us to make a great bond and connection. At one point in our windows in Kennebunkport, I had been really captivated by a quote by William Morris. And it was, have nothing in your life that isn't either beautiful or useful, and better if both. And for some reason, it just really struck me at a time. And I did hand write it with marker, kind of on the side window of our window. I had more people tell me that they had passed by, read that sign, and felt like they needed to come into the store and learn more about what we had. I think one of the interesting things as retailers is we are the style makers. We're the trendsetters. We're the people who people are seeking to, especially in today's world, go through all of the stuff and find the things that matter and present them to the public. We don't want to forget that that isn't just in our product. A lot of times I'll be helping a retail situation to say, I just don't know how to display that product. I just don't know how to make it look great. Well, the first question I ask them is, what made you buy it? Like, what scenario, what moment were you at in your life where that little piece jumped out at you in a trade show of 10 billion things to make you want to bring it home? So I think it's really important to remember what captivates us so that we can share it with others. So that's kind of our storefronts that sell. We're going to move into captivating with windows. So I believe that creating an enchanting, absorbing, and inspiring visual environment can produce an emotional response and develop a passion for the brand. So a lot of times in our windows, a lot of times in our presentation, in our interior displays, we're selling the product. But product changes. Product sometimes breaks. Product that we sometimes think is really great ends up being a dud. What we want to do is sell our brand. We want to sell a loyalty that beyond the product, they love your store. They can probably get the merchandise anywhere else now, but they want to buy it from you because of the presentation you've made for them, or the story that you tell them, or the relationship that you have with them. Creating those environments where they feel like they're special helps to create that emotional bond. Good store windows, I think, are a mix of theater and visual advertising. They connect you with your audience. They're that moment where the curtain is drawn and you get a peek into what lies beyond. So we were in the old port when 9/11 struck our world. We were in retail, and we knew that potentially the bottom was going to fall out. And to some extent it did. Those who dared to come out in those first, weeks were loyal, but we felt the pressure. Our vendors felt the pressure. Prices went up. There was such uncertainty in the world. Now, typically you build your holiday window. So I went, through the year, we felt the pull, we felt the tug. Usually when you build your holiday window, you're like trying to sell something, right? I felt very seriously like what I needed to do for our store in that time was pull the product back and send a message to the world. And I hoped that by doing so, it would up our sales even. So we didn't have a lot of extra money to build a window that year. We were known for our windows, and we had vast windows. We had 15 feet on each side of a glass door and 10 feet up. I cut out a foam core, what would be a half world, a half planet. We cut out a foam core the shape of angels that were 7 feet high. We had some old red theater velvet, and I purchased some white doves. I think the whole window might have cost $50 and a lot of sweat equity. We found old newspapers from the 40s. We tore them into little shreds. This was war. This was bad times. And we collaged them on top of the angels. And our message was peace on earth. And there was probably a smattering of some product somewhere in there. We, on opening day, Black Friday, we had people lined up all the way down the corner. I'm not sure that all of them even knew what they were coming into. Portland has the good fortune of also being a tourist town. So I'm not sure everybody knew what they were coming into, but they knew the story that they were entering. So I would really like to focus a lot on windows, of making sure that we are telling our story. Sometimes it's about product. There are 3 areas that I think really jump out at me as challenging windows. One is seasonal. When I realized the importance of our windows, I would start at the January trade show, looking at things as I went that intrigued me and thinking of them in a monthly pattern, like, oh, that would be really great in a March window. And I would start to do my buying, or at least my planning of buying, months in advance, really around, in some cases, the window. The holiday window can sometimes be holiday appeal, but it often is really a bond with our community, right? It's saying we're celebrating with you. We're part of you. It's a kind of shared humanness. Now then, there are those months that are not holiday months, like what do you do in January? In those months, I think we can really talk about how to create some seasonal interest. And then there are interesting windows that are about an announcement, 50-year anniversary, or a special sale that's going on, or a special event. So when we talk seasonal, I think it's really important for us to concentrate not just on the red, the green, the Christmas tree, the wrapped packages, but that would be our theme. But inside a theme is this more specific story. So I want to talk to you a little bit about that. Like, who has ever been into Target in January? And the minute you walk through the door, there are bikini bathing suits lining the entire right hand, and you think, really? Okay, great. They're trying to sell them, right, for people who are going away in February, but they never really tell us that. And that's the big boys making a mistake. A great picture behind that with a woman with a sun hat, lying on the beach might explain it to me a little better than me coming in with my boots, my hat, my coat, my umbrella. So we don't want to do that. We want to make sure that our story is specific. This is our chance to connect with our customers, telling them our story, or maybe even telling them their story. So one year, again, I was retail, so I was in the same boat as you. There were lean times and there were great times. And one year, I wasn't really inspired. I couldn't think of a window. I didn't really have money to invest in the window. And it just coincided with the time, like, you might not believe this, and I wouldn't suggest this in your own communities, but it gives you an example. It coexisted at a time when a friend of mine was like, I'm going away for 2 weeks in, I think this was maybe October, and I don't have a place for my chickens. And I was like, I have a window in my store. It's like 5 feet deep, 10 feet high, 15 feet wide. Do you think your chickens would like my window? And so we proceeded to build chicken wire in the backdrop of the window. We gave them hay bales, we gave them ladders, we gave them things to climb on. Those chickens laid eggs in my windows. And people came from all over to look at those windows. On the other side of the window, we did a fall display. We did kind of a barnyard scene and did a fall display. But I still have people write letters to me every once in a while on our Dunroman email. I remember the time when I walked by and there were chickens in the window. We actually had a rooster in there for a couple of days until he made so much noise that we had to let him go. So sometimes it's looking for the story within the story. Like, here is a great example of, it makes you feel like spring, right? But it's not just spring. It's Mr. McGregor's garden. So when we kind of draw in a little bit, it's not such a vast and daunting, what do I say about spring? It brings us into a smaller framework that we can create a better idea and a better story from. This one here is a great example because it says Christmas, it says winter. It kind of sets the foreground for the jewelry that is really the highlight. So that jewelry, without that setting, would be a walk-by window. You'd never see it. You'd never notice it. Having that foreground tells a little bit more about the story and draws you in. I think this is a great example of a January window, right? It's cold, I'm stocking up my wood, or I'm out. There's not a lot of expense there. That's not an expensive window. That's a window that really bonds you. It's your product, it's your mannequin, and it's a pile of wood, which we all probably have. A few lights and a backdrop. So that backdrop, in this case, is printed. Yours wouldn't have to be. It could be white scrim. That's, 45 cents a yard, hung just to give it a little bit of a background. And honestly, it probably could do without. I think this is a great example of elevating the product. Like, take that gingerbread house out and you have a mannequin with a dress on. Put that gingerbread in and you've got a holiday gift. You've got a holiday presentation. I think this is also this is almost philosophical story as well as a seasonal story. It's the when life hands you lemons, make lemonade. So I think really, again, draws you in. tells a story about what they carry inside, and presents a really wonderful seasonal setting. So after talking about story, we're going to talk about story. So I think one of the biggest things about story is that it reinforces your brand and your product offering. So one of the things that's easy to do when we start talking so much about product is that oftentimes we forget the bigger story. We forget our brand. I see this happen, interesting that we're in a bank. I see this happen a lot with banks, with bank windows, with cafe windows, with attorney windows. We forget that we still are a face to our client. We're a face to our community. And every empty window that we're sitting behind, I guess I was brought up to believe that whatever you do, try to do well for others. I think it's our responsibility to make sure that we're creating an intriguing environment. We have a bank in Yarmouth that's newly opened in a brand new building. Big, beautiful windows. Why would they put windows if they're not going to use them? So they have 3 vast windows, side by side, and then another bigger window that sits on its own. And in the left-hand corner, left-hand corner, is a neon sign that's about this big that says open. Seriously! So what that says to me is we're open just a little bit. Like we're only this open. Why not a sign that says, come meet us, we're your new neighbor. We are the answer to all of your problems. Vinyl lettering in that window would not only make it a more interesting drive-by, but, well, obviously, would bring them the customers they need, because if they had to put the neon sign out there, they're needing to let somebody know that they're open. I say if we're going to say we're open, let's say it in a big way. Also with story, we enhance the theme, which helps us sell. It helps to sell the product. It also helps us to promote lines. Not just the individual product that we carry, but say the line of product that we carry. All of that, like times limited for those of you who might have a home or women's store. Lets you know not only are we focused on the fir balsam fragrance this month, but we carry times limited. It's important to start the story based on a theme versus starting the theme. If we start with our story, then the theme is obvious. If we start with the theme, our story gets hard to zero in on. And so then let's look at a few that start to really focus on story. One of the most interesting things about this one up here is that it's obvious, right? It's nautical. But that nautical setting has allowed that retailer to sell a bikini, a towel, a hat, a leather purse, a basket, towels. It takes all of these elements and gives them a reason for being there. If you try to take all of those elements and put them in a window, you would never, ever have the continuity or actually have the ability to sell that product from the window. I think this one is interesting because it tells a lot about the product, right? In a whimsical way, it shows the product, but it also says this is natural, like these come from sheep. This is a great way to just reinforce the story that you're telling. This one down here is a yarn store. Like, that's hard. How do you put yarn in a window and have it be really interesting? So in the bottom, they've said who they are and what they sell. Brand Yarn Company, I think it is. And then they've actually made products out of yarn and put them in the window. Again, this one here with the little tree is just elevating the product that is living on it. A great thing for a sports store is just to say, hey, game on. And this time of year, we're focusing on soccer. This is a yarn and ribbon store. What a great, fun way to say, this is who we are. We can't put our ribbon in here. You'll never, ever notice it. An investment of a couple $100s in a window like that, I mean, you could have it up for years and just introduce little bits of new nuances every month. So the next thing I want to talk about are sale windows. So one of the things that I think often happens for me with sale windows is they often can have kind of a negative association. We all want the savings, but we really don't want unwanted merchandise. So I think bringing style and humor to the experience makes it special. It gets people excited from the street. It's like a party that you're invited to. It elevates the experience and engages people from outside. And I think all of these are really great examples. Like in this one, it's sale, and you know some of what is selling inside. This is like, we're having a sale, you better come in to find out what it's all about. This is just, I think, an interesting way of saying sale. Clothing store with a mannequin dressed with just the letters around him on bags saying sale. So I think that there are important ways for us to be mindful about every type of window that we're doing and not just throw it out there, this is a sale, whatever, 50% off. I don't know that that actually is going to get you the clientele that you want to come in and buy. One year at Doug Roman in the Old Port, on our basement level, we just had merchandise that needed to move. It was just tired. So I set up a whole back of the store and I made signs, like looked like yard sale signs. And we just posted them around and put them outside like you would for a yard sale. Oh my word, not only did we sell out of everything in the yard sale, but our numbers of regularly priced merchandise were crazy that weekend because we generated, I mean, an excitement. Like, did you see this? This is what I'm gonna buy. So now, I'm running quite short on time, I think, so I might speed up a little bit. Thank you for listening. So now I think the important thing is talking about product. So there are some windows that are just about the product, right? We're not trying to tell a story or do a theme, like we just hardcore want to sell product. So in this case, we're obviously setting up a beautiful environment that is still theme and interesting, but it is about the scarf. In this one, we're selling cakes. It's obvious. Come in, check out our cakes. In this one, it's an interesting way to sell product. It's jewelry with little mannequins kind of dressing each other. This one, we're all about candy. That's who we are, that's what we do. Candy, fudge. This one I think just creates a little bit of a setting around the product. The product is the main focus, but it gives a little bit of a backdrop to bring some attention into the product. This one is all about the product. Whatever you see in the window is probably for sale. Come on into the store and see more. I think this is a really interesting example, especially for novice merchandisers. I know there are some people who are like, oh my God, I'm never going to be good at windows. But I think what happens then, and I've dealt with a lot of clients who aren't good at windows, so what we do is set up a permanent display. We set up a foundation. This is a great example of that. It's a permanent foundation. It's a structure within the window that allows you then to remove certain things and replace them with new things. So the window is ever changing. The foundation is simple, and that's, if you have a general store, that's a great way to get a lot of junk, a lot of stuff in the window and create frames around that product. So as a whole, it doesn't look like a mess. This window is, you know, antique stores have the best. They can say, you like what you see? Come see more. All about product. So now I think we start to talk about designing with intent. When designing windows, it's important to remember it's going to be the first thing that people see driving by or walking by, and it has to have pull to captivate attention. We go about capturing the attention with purpose. So who is our demographic? Who are we trying to sell to? Who are we trying to sell to with this window? And I think one mistake that we often make as retailers is we're selling to the people that are already sold, right? If you're a woman's clothing store, you got me. I'll be stopping by, you know, as long as your presence is attractive. But I think it's really important to remember that that woman probably either has a child with her, maybe a husband. So creating that environment that doesn't say, oh God, that's a woman's store, I'm not going in there. And I'll tell you one thing I learned, sorry men, of 10 years of having a retail store, which was highly feminine. We sold European soaps, we sold antiques, we sold fresh flowers, we sold dried flowers, we sold furnishings. Throughout the store, every product had a story card. Every product we talked about the origin of that product, who made it, where it was made, why it was intriguing to us. And even when men couldn't be interested in the pile of European soaps, we would watch them wander the store reading. So it's important to engage your customer, engage them in that window, and not to forget that if you want a woman to stay longer, you bring a man into the store, and vice versa. So I think we start captivate with theme and story. So how do we captivate with our windows? With theme and story. So what is your theme? I think it's important to build intrigue and tell your story, but not all of your story. I think oftentimes we think, I gotta have a little bit of everything in my window or someone might not know who I am. I think that's a mistake. I think that people know who we are by the story that we're telling. I would entice people. We don't want to tell the whole story at the window side. We give people the opportunity to walk away and think they've seen it all. This is particularly done a lot in technology stores where you walk by and there's like 65 cameras and the price is out there and there's 12 calculators and the price. Why do I need to go in? Like, I just saw everything that you have to show me with the price outside. Some people talk about, price in the window really helps to let people know what they're getting. I'm a big believer in price inside my store. Like, if you come in, you'll find out, enhance your brand. We talked a little bit about this one earlier. This one is jars of jelly beans. And I put this one in here intentionally because they've elevated the jelly beans. These are not just jelly beans. These are our jelly beans. There's something about this display that makes these jelly beans feel really special, even if the guy down the road is selling bulk Jelly Bellies. Ours are really beautiful and really special. It's just that small moment of purpose that makes the difference between two very like products. And then this is a great example of suggestive selling. It's fall. We're talking texture. We want to talk about a shirt, a scarf, a hat, boots. Oh, and we have the purse. And setting it up in an example that honors the seasonal setting. So next we talk about attracting with color and bold message. And I think all of these are really great examples. You have about 5 seconds to capture someone's attention. And that's probably actually significantly reduced in our world today. I'm trying to see that clock in.
10:28.
Oh, am I doing okay? So I think one of the important things is to elevate the mundane, right? Sometimes we have products in our store that are not exciting, but if we elevate them in a way that captures interest, they're a sold deal. So I think in this one, it's really, we're obviously a clothing store, a kids' clothing store, but it's emboldened by color. I think this one is all about the story. It's a pair of shoes. And it's saying, make a splash. It's summertime, it's bold, it's just a simple, bold message. And this gives you an idea of what to do with all the broken mannequins that you have hanging about. I think this one is a really great in-between window. Like, I really don't have anything to say this month. So do something crazy, do something bold, do something that says, did you forget we're here? Do something that says, come in from the cold, our heat's on. Do something that says, giving away free tea, come visit us. Do something that says, we're here. I think this is a great example, this red leg, red hand. Those are 3 shoes. Like, I want to buy those shoes from here just because I want to honor the artistry and creativity that went into creating a display like that. It could be done for a sneaker store. It could be done for heels. I think it's just a really interesting way to take something very small, very mundane, and turn it into something very big. You guys are fortunate in that you live in the world of Pinterest and all those other things. I didn't. I mean, I was still from the belief in 2004 when we closed our store that the internet was never going to sell product. That people were always going to want the experience, and I truly believed it. We had a rule in our store that you couldn't take photographs in our store. All of our products were artisan-based products. You know, people taking the pictures and then taking them off to China. I also was an artist, so taking pictures of my displays was something very personal for me. Today's world, I would have to embrace it, and actually now it's set up to embrace it in a big way. If I'm a New Yorker and I take a picture of this window, I mean, you have seriously lost an opportunity if you don't create windows that say, hey, I was in Camden and I saw this great window. Next time you're in Camden, you've got to stop at this store. This is a great way to take booths and really elevate them, make them really fun. We have had windows where I bought bags of dirt, bags and bags of dirt, and just poured it in the bottom of our window frame and planted grass, wheatgrass, in lines in March, threw a couple stuffed bunnies in the window. It cost me $25, but it said, come in, we're here with you, it's spring, it's coming. I think this is a really interesting, really interesting way to display merchandise in a window. I think what happens here is the display goes away, in a way, and the product takes forefront. If I had a clothing store right now, I would set my window up right now with this type of display, and I would keep it there. What happens then, people are coming by to see what creative way you managed to show a little car and a little can. What creative thing you've done with your boards this month. I think it really, and for a novice merchandiser, again, this is an incredible way to say, the foreground set, all I've got to think about is what I'm going to put on that board this month. It could be a message. It could be sale. It could be welcome to winter. I think it's just a very interesting way to showcase product, particularly for those who might not be passionate about window displays. It really becomes all about the product. Changing your ribbon, your rope that's hanging down, just changing that color can change everything about the display. So obviously I could go on for days. I'm going to kind of zip through what I feel like there are billions of elements of design. But I feel like at first stage, if we conquer 8 of them, we've done a really good job at bringing people into our store and through our windows. So the first one is balance. So if you look at your window and you split it right down the middle, sometimes we create an asymmetrical display, which would be heavier on one side and lighter on the other. And we do that kind of to show this is what it looks like, and these are the pieces and parts of it. Other ways are top to bottom, and always heavier merchandise lower than light merchandise, always. If in a window scenario, particularly, if I'm down lower than that window and you have heavy goods higher than lighter goods, it will pull me away from the window because I feel like the window is going to tumble down on me. Light to dark, so it's that story, left to right. Distributing the weight throughout a display. So interestingly in this one, it's kind of like painting. A painter will kind of take a color and move it throughout a piece of art, so our eye moves with it. This is a great example of the prop just framing the display and creating balance. It's kind of a flow that brings you from the top all the way to the bottom. This is a really great example of balance, cutting that down the middle and using up all the scale of the window. I think this one's really interesting and rather dramatic, but what a fun way. Take a mannequin, hang her upside down, put a purse in her hand, create a backdrop against it. For us in Maine, that looks like so sophisticated, right? That's definitely a Bergdorf or a New York window, but why not? I think this is a great example of creating a backdrop. This is like totally down the middle. But again, she's not standing there alone. She's framed by other product. This is a great example of creating height and balance and bringing your eye all the way down. I mean, I think probably all of this is product, but we don't miss that the product, the real product, is front and center. So focal points, I think the first thing always is to keep it simple. Where does the viewer eye focus on your display and creating hotspots? So in this one up top, they just used a circle of color, really interestingly. They took their prop boxes, which could be cardboard, and painted them the same color as their backdrop. So what you have is product on the middle that really punches. This is an interesting creative backdrop with a little swing, outfit, purse. What a way to sell a product. You wouldn't need the backdrop. Simple. I mean, in Maine, most of our stores are so old that we probably have beams up there somewhere that can hang. This is hard for you to read, but this is a bicycle. And it's just got lit stars and then a bunch of product falling out of the basket. That creates the focal point that sells the merchandise. In this one, if you took away the kites, that's just a girl in a dress, right? By surrounding her with kites, and this could be themed colored kites with a white dress, by surrounding her with something that is nostalgic and that we attach to, we've sold that product. The next thing is using color. I mean, color is everything. So in this one, this is just a group of small white boxes, right? And a shoe, a pair of shoes, a shirt, a tie. But by elevating them on those white boxes and using the various color boxes around them, you've drawn your eye up and in. This is a gorgeous window for nothing. And again, if you made the investment in good boxes, those boxes stay. You've got like 6 months of a window out of there just changing the pair of shoes on the lot. Another great example, simple, same concept, but done with pattern to make the singular color of the yellow purses pop. This one sets a backdrop of a solid kind of muted color so that that foreground of that yellow shirt, I mean, that is my focal point. That color is everything. And this, what an interesting way, taking a bunch of white watches. I mean, you obviously have other watches, but taking a group of white watches, setting them on that colorful background. That actually really makes the watches feel bigger. So then scale. So I'm a big believer in that people love to look at things that are the wrong size, right? If you put a little truck in a big window, people are like, oh, especially if it's got books climbing out of it or some interesting thing. Scale is something that draws us in and influences mood and impact. It creates humor. In this one up here, just that little mention of those scissors not only tells me the story tailored, but it also just brings enough interest so it's not just another display of a bunch of women dressed up, standing in a window. I think scale does it in this one as well. That oversized big flower kind of draws your attention in and frames the display. Having these oversized butterflies, there's just one dress in that window, but that window feels vast and abundant. This display still cracks me up. I just love the idea that one little mention of humor and scale would draw me to that window, and I would definitely want to meet the person in the store. So then lighting, and I think that lighting in my residential work, in all of my commercial work, lighting is our biggest thing we forget. So I have clients all the time, particularly in the residential realm, where I'll walk into their living room and they'll say, I don't know, no one wants to be in here. I'm like, it's dark. You don't have a lamp. And it's the same, we follow light. We follow light. If there's light, we will find it. And I think when we don't light our entrances, we're just saying, you don't really matter. I don't need you in here. If we don't light our windows, we're just like really wasting a huge investment that we're making in the rental of those windows. But I think it's important that there are different types of light. There's light that elevates and highlights. There's hot light. I mean, that light is lit on the product. This light is a backdrop, but draws your eye in and makes that display more interesting. This is a hot light. This light is lighting the product. This light wants you to really see nothing around this display except the product. And this light incorporates great lighting throughout the space and then adds a touch of whimsy with additional lighting. This was taught to me back in my early 20s by Gordon Siegel. He was the first man to introduce the idea of repetition. And his belief was that putting things in threes and repeating the same element over 3 times was his deal, that it cements the product in your mind. That the first time you see it, the second time it's absorbed, and the third time you actually engage with the product. So using patterns of 3 is a powerful balancing visual. In the top, that's just a little tube of hand cream held by 20 mannequin hands. But by repeating it over and over again, you have that mannequin's hand with the lotion. It just repeats that message so many times that it makes it really exciting, instead of one little elevated tube of lotion. These little mannequin guys, repeatedly in a line holding a tie. You don't walk away from that not knowing. This is a more extensive version, but just by repeating that image over, it cements that vision in your mind. This display is interesting because it's probably hard for you guys to see, but can you see what they're selling? Sunglasses. So there are 3, and they're in their whole bunch here. You have to come in close enough to that display. You would want to anyway, but you have to come in close enough to that display to engage with the product. I think sometimes we think my windows have to be so great that everybody can see what I'm selling from across the road, but what if they just walk by them? Well, my belief is that every step we get them closer to our store, the more likely they will be in to come, and by then, I think the more likely they are to invest. So pyramiding, this is great for novice designer or window people. You start high and just gently bring your display down low. In this instance, this is great. They're selling a pair of shoes. The candy in the jar just happens to be the same color. It brings me into the display and it gives me some height so that my eye has a chance to wander. Same in this one. These guys are actually clustered in a pyramid over a display of product that's just in rows. And then this, obviously top to bottom, and they stagger that pyramid. It drags your eye throughout the display. It creates a focal point and keeps it from being flat or boring. A lot of people believe that in a Windows display, what happens then is it feels like the product is tumbling down to the customer. And then props. So have fun. These are socks. Socks drying over a campfire on a string. I mean, that says so much more than I'm here, I sell socks. It's like, I'm a Mainer, I know what wet socks are. And I know what great wool wet socks are. This one is an interesting way, again, to elevate product in a window so it's not all just down low and you can't see it from across the road. Great way to use props to suggest the selling of a high-end men's shoe. It's a suitcase, it's a traveler, he's a reader. So you're telling a little bit of a story about who might wear these shoes. I think this one is a great display, and take these back, please take this back to your communities for empty windows. If a group of you got together and said, we're gonna make a killer display in this empty storefront, and it's a bike, it's some luggage, it's a few things with a big, big cardboard, no cost there, banner that says, shop local, come visit us. I think it's that ownership. Empty spaces don't send a good message. Dirty sidewalks don't send a good message. Take the responsibility on yourself to make that better. I'm not going to go through the synopsis and summary in great detail because you all have a copy of it with you. But to summarize, I'd say don't overdo it. Less is more. Make merchandise the focal point. You know how in television commercials, sometimes when you watch the commercial and it's over, you're like, what were they selling? Make it your point to make sure that they either know the actual product that you're selling or the story that you're selling behind the product. Accentuate product with good lighting, stack products, or use a pyramid. Have fun with mannequins. I mean, we all know what a mannequin looks like, right? So you extend her arm in an interesting way, and she's holding the bag up here, hanging off her hand rather than down here. Not only have you built height in your display, you've put the focal point not on the mannequin, but on the product. Be creative. Remember your theme, and don't forget the drivers. Don't forget the driveways. So the next, and I didn't think through that you wouldn't actually have copies of this, so I put...
Well, Rhonda, we will put this on our website.
Okay, good.
For people. We send a post email which will include a link to your presentation for them to see it.
So I've included some great resources for you, resources that I only discovered having worked for the big guys at General Growth Properties. So these are like mall resources. They're really affordable, they're overblown size, they're great props for a building. You can make a small investment in something that makes you feel bigger, feel better. Things that we oftentimes in our smaller businesses don't have access to. So I've given you a whole list of them. One of them actually is Wilson's Used Retail in Biddeford. But the others are great resources that usually only the big boys know about. And then I wanted to make a suggestion to you as well. I only thought of this yesterday. I was driving. I've been asked to intern a couple young women in Yarmouth in March. And it started me thinking, for those of you who may feel, I'm tired, I've been doing windows for 25 years. I don't have anything new to say. Or I was never good at it to begin with, or I just don't have a vision. Every community, so when I looked through our downtown, where this focus, every one of you has a school locally, high schools, obvious, but colleges, and they all are starting to have visual merchandising programs within their marketing divisions. Reach out. There's gotta be 30 or 40 kids out there who would love nothing more than to crawl up in your window once a month and do your display. And these are artists. These aren't kids who are going to look at making a giant moon for your window as any big deal at all. So I would really recommend, and I'll be in touch with Ann a little too, because I might be able to help instigate some of that by finding out USM, UMO, Bowdoin has a visual merchandising program. They're all starting to have, UNE has a visual merchandising program. I think it's under their marketing division, but they're all starting to take this very seriously. And if you don't happen to have a college, you definitely have an art program in your high school. And those kids would love nothing more than to celebrate your windows with you. So that's it. Thank you for your time.